Good morning or good afternoon. COVID-19 significantly increased the pace of digitalisation and with it the importance of having access to the technology we need to connect, work and learn in an environment where in-person interaction wasn't possible. To succeed in this increasingly digital world, communities need both digital access and digital skills. Today we're going to explore some of the digital equity challenges that are playing out around the world and the role that telecommunication companies can play in providing solutions. I'm delighted today to be joined by three highly regarded telecommunications leaders. Marta Wojciechowska, CEO of FiberHost in Poland, John James, CEO of NewDay in Denmark, and David Flesser, CEO of Accelercom in Kentucky in the USA. Welcome, Marta, John, and David. Firstly, I'd like you to tell me a little bit about your organisations and the services that you provide. I'll start first with you, Marta.
Hello, everyone. So about FiberHost. So for nearly 30 years, we, as FiberHost, we have operated as an integrated operator. So we were building the infrastructure to provide retail services. But when we started our adventure with fiber optic networks, we saw how great opportunities they give. We felt that open access was the model we wanted to base our strategy on. Therefore, we demerged the retail part and focused on the open access. Open access means that we build the FTTH network, but we are focused on giving access to third-party operators to use it and to provide their services to their end consumers using our network. And our strategy has been based on an open network model from the very beginning. We believe that this is the most effective and the most sustainable way to reach more residents of our country with high speed and reliable internet. So we started our activities in one region of Poland, first in larger cities, later also in less urbanized areas. And currently as a group, we carry out investments in 8 out of 16 voivodeships in our country, in Poland. It means over 7,000 towns in rural areas. We build our networks as part of our investments, but also with the support of EU subsidies. We built the unique infrastructure, so we reach places previously excluded digitally with FTTH technology, of course. Now there are over 1 million households within reach of our network, and by the end of the year, it will be 1.3 million households.
Thanks very much, Marta. John, if I turn to you.
Hi, everyone. So I'm John, and I'm the Chief Executive of NewDay, which is the largest telco in Denmark. So following a similar demerger to Marta's organisation, we are the other half of the coin. So we are the retailer. We have inherited the customers of what was formerly the National Telco of Denmark, TDC. And NewDay covers some 8 independent brands, which span everywhere from consumer, the largest brand being UC, offering broadband, TV, and mobile across Denmark, through some smaller brands offering individual products, into B2B, where we offer our TDC Erhverv subsidiary is Denmark's largest business telco, offering the full range of complex services from mobile and broadband all the way through to security, network automation, call centers, and so on. So in a small country, we offer very much a full range of services across multiple brands to Denmark. We are the largest provider both to consumers and to businesses in Denmark, with around 1 million homes taking broadband, a similar number taking TV from us, some 2 million taking mobile. We have been 50% owned by Macquarie since 2018, together with a collection of Danish pension funds. And we are, we'll say more about our digital strategies later on, but it's suffice to say that Denmark is one of the most digitally advanced countries in Europe and indeed the world, particularly in terms of adoption of digital services. So we're very much focused on how customers use and consume those services in parallel with our infrastructure colleagues who are more worried about making sure that everyone has access to superfast broadband.
Thanks very much, John. And David, if we turn to you to round up on your organisation and the services you provide.
Great, thanks, Nathan. I'm Dave Flessis. I'm CEO of Excelicom. We're the exclusive broadband partner of the Commonwealth of Kentucky. We provide state-of-the-art broadband service over the Kentucky Wired Network, which was constructed by the state. That network is 3,200 miles of 288 strand fiber. It covers all 120 counties in the state. The state, our state partner, provides service to a pretty short list of state agencies. It's our mission to serve everybody else. State of the art, by the way, is not a throwaway. Everything is brand new. The fiber and the optical equipment, the network equipment. The back office is built exact and brand new. So it is truly state of the art. We've got about 50 employees here in Louisville and many more contract associates throughout the state.
Brilliant. Thank you, David. Marta, if we turn to Poland, the Polish government has been working hard to enhance rural connectivity and bring services to those living outside of urban areas of an equivalent nature. Could you talk a little bit about the digital exclusion issues that exist in Poland in those rural areas and what the drivers are?
Mm-hmm. So what you need to know first is that almost 20% of Poles still do not have access to the internet at home today. This is mostly in rural areas. So this is the main issue in digital exclusion: lack of access to stable, high-speed and reliable internet. So currently we are in a critical time for the deployment of full fiber networks across the whole Poland. The European Commission and Polish government, they both have the ambition for all citizens of Poland to have access to gigabit connectivity by 2030. And of course, in recent years, fiber coverage in Poland has increased significantly, mainly thanks to this public funding funded by EU and Polish government. However, extending this fiber coverage beyond the current levels to fill in this 20% gap will involve deploying to more remote, to places that are less densely populated. And obviously the cost of fiber deployment is significantly higher in these areas. So investment at an even larger scale will be required. So, without EU funds, it will not be possible. Luckily, Poland agrees with the European Commission on the conditions for launching another 2 billion euros program for constructing this network. And as the lack of coverage with a high-speed fiber optic network is one of the problems, by far the most serious, however, there is a massive obstacle in combating this digital exclusion is another. This is people's unwillingness to use the broadband internet. It's not so rare that once we have built a network nowadays, there are areas where residents do not want to use fiber optic. And most often this is due to lack of knowledge, lack of awareness about how many advantages the fiber optic technology has and how much it can change their lives and increase the quality of their lives. It's really vast and underestimated issue in Poland because there is still over 4.5 million Poles. It's like almost 8-9% who have never used the internet before. So this is a very important problem right now.
Wow, that is fascinating. So I guess it shows, Marta, that it's fantastic that the EU and the Polish government have made funding available, but it's not the whole solution. Could you just describe what else FiberHost is doing to try and help with that challenge?
Mm-hmm. Well, mainly, of course, this is connected with the fiber deployment. And as you said, without the EU funds, and as I said also before, without EU funds, it would be very difficult. We are actually the largest beneficiary of this EU funds in Poland. And, as I said, without this, when we have the most challenging investment, the most expensive one, and we are building, a network where no one have built or even thought of building the network before. So this is our main aim, main goal, to build as many as possible. And as I said, we are now the biggest beneficiary of EU funds, and from this EU perspective that we are participating in right now, we will cover over 600,000 HPs, households. And of course, our plans go even further. We declare our willingness to participate in future perspectives, in future projects, because this is our mission. This is to combat digital exclusion to the highest possible extent. And we know how to do it. We have great experience in building. And I can say that this is the easiest part. Because as I mentioned before, with the problems with people's awareness, this is much more difficult. Because in the areas that people have been digitally excluded for a long time, it's very difficult. So this is challenging for us. And of course, what we do, we educate. We are spreading knowledge about new technologies. We conduct many information activities where we are building and where we have our networks. Just recently, we started a project of workshops on new technologies. We called it FiberHost Academy. So what we do is we basically help to gain the knowledge to let's say, conquer the new technologies. We want to show to people the practical information on how to shop online, how to use bank account online, how to Skype to their grandparents, and so on. We want people to know that the fiber optics are an opportunity. And this is the opportunity for the residents, but also for the entire regions. The FiberHost Academy is directed to seniors mostly, but we support children as well. When we build our network, we always connect each and every school on the territory. This is like natural for us, let's say. And in this activity, government also help us because they pay the fees for internet services to every school. It is important to show the benefits of the internet as soon as possible, as soon as possible, as the youngest people, the better in the future. So there's still much to do, but it also gives us a lot of challenges, and this is what we like the most. So a lot ahead of us, and as I say, education.
Indeed. No, thank you, Marta. That education really has a big role to play here. David, if we turn to Kentucky, there's been talk of a digital divide in Kentucky, and I'm keen to explore this from a US perspective and maybe make some comparisons to what Marta's describing in Poland. I believe there are 120 or so counties in Kentucky, big area, a lot of communities to cover. So what are the challenges that you're seeing?
It's certainly the digital divide has existed in Kentucky, Nathan. So the biggest challenge has been just bringing affordable broadband to the far reaches, the far hollers in Kentucky. It is a big state. It's largely rural. It's topographically diverse in the east. It's mountainous with the Appalachians. In the west, it's agricultural and not terribly dense. There's an industrial core in the north central area between Cincinnati, suburban Cincinnati, Louisville, and Lexington. But the state has not been well served over the course of the past 40 years. It's expensive to build in the east. It's expensive to build in the west because of lack of density. 5 years ago, many surveys had Kentucky in the bottom 20% nationwide in terms of broadband availability. So the story is, if you were in Louisville or Lexington, you probably had broadband and maybe even a choice of broadband providers. If you're anywhere other than Louisville or Lexington, you either didn't have broadband or you couldn't afford broadband. So that's the digital divide that we're working to solve here in Kentucky.
Wow, that is a substantial divide. You're doing a lot of work to construct a high-speed, high-capacity fibre optic network across the state. Could you tell us a bit more about that and how you're finding it so far?
Yeah, it's been going great so far. We're about a year into our lateral construction program. We've have signed up new customers in 90 of the 120 counties, so pretty good penetration statewide. We've got about 300 construction projects underway, a couple hundred miles of fiber extensions in development. We serve enterprise and large business customers directly, so we are a last mile provider to enterprise large business customers. We also enable, as a middle mile provider, existing ISPs, both and new ISPs as they come along, fixed wireless providers, for example, to serve residential and small business customers. So again, our depending on the customer type, we are connecting everybody we can. We've had great success in several verticals. We've had really good success in healthcare across the state. Again, particularly in the East. Lots of rural clinics who have not had much connectivity or throughput available to them at all. That means they can't, provide remote telehealth services to their patients. That's been a problem. We're working on connecting those subject matter experts at the University of Kentucky in Lexington and at the University of Louisville so that people in rural healthcare can see patients virtually throughout the state and bring that, kind of big city expertise, if you will, to all 120 counties. That same model applies to agriculture. We're working to connect the 120 University of Kentucky agricultural extension offices, one in each county, again, back to university experts to have access to all the resources that can be provided there. So we've made pretty good progress out of the gate, Nathan. I think we're delivering on the promise of bridging the digital divide. And importantly, I think our model and as I said, our brand new back office is easily extendable, and so we're hoping to bolt on other states and other geographies with the same sort of service offer that we've had good success with here in Kentucky.
Fantastic, and that's certainly something we've seen in other parts of the world of one operator being able to provide sort of overlay services to other fiber networks when they get built in other regions. So, look, thanks very much for sharing that, David. John, if we turn to you, perhaps in contrast to Poland and Kentucky, Denmark is one of the most digitized countries in Europe, one of the highest in terms of availability of high-speed, reliable broadband. So I imagine that sort of provides a different challenge on equity. So maybe just tell us about what challenges you're seeing in Denmark.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. Denmark has not finished the fiber rollout journey, but we are at 76% coverage in the rural areas, and obviously higher in city areas. And it's a very digitized society in terms of the non-physical infrastructure. So if you're a Dane, of the 5.9 million Danes, 5.2 million of them have something called a NEM ID, which is essentially a combination of your bank details and your national ID number, without which, good luck shopping, having a bank account, traveling in Denmark. It's an absolutely vital kind of backbone of their economy, and it's almost exclusively digital. It's a digital infrastructure. So of those 5.2 million who have a NEM ID, and by the way, this is a similar structure in many of the other Nordic countries, but of that 5.2 million, only 330,000 Danes. There's only 330,000 Danes who don't use it digitally. You have to secure an exemption for reasons of mental illness or age. So it gives you some idea of just how pervasive the digital society is. And the digital exclusion would be a huge issue for people who can't understand it or can't get access to it, because in the end, operating without these digital capabilities is genuinely disabling. So part of our role is to help educate people, and we have a specific program with our shops, which are well penetrated in rural Denmark, where older people regularly come in for evening classes, where we help them get on NEM ID, help them use digital infrastructure. But I think the bigger point is that as digital infrastructure penetration, the rollout and penetration, starts to plateau, that doesn't mean the job is finished. There's another wave of, as you open up this enormous, unnavigated, world of content and services on the internet, then actually digital skills and digital literacy are super important if we're going to play a role, as a responsible provider and help people move from a very curated world of services and media into a world where anything is possible. So one first step that we've taken is we support a charity called Beyond Villecor, which is children's welfare, and we educate parents and through schools on helping kids at a very young age to start to navigate the internet successfully. So part of that is, not doing too much of it. So healthy use of digital devices, how much time you spend on there. And by the way, a lot of that is about educating parents, because kids do what parents do, not what parents say. So educating parents to be disciplined is often the first step. But it's also about not sharing photos online, or doing so in a kind of disciplined way and understanding the implications of that. It's also understanding grooming and what can happen to kids if they wander into some of the darker corners of the internet. And that's just one thing that we're doing. We're also doing coding classes for kids, helping them to understand how to actually manage and construct an internet that they're interested in. But actually, as time goes on, we're starting to think more and more about some of those adult digital skills. And there's some fascinating examples from Finland of education, both for kids and adults, in digital literacy and being able to sort fake news from the real stuff. So I think there's a whole journey that we as providers should consider, even once the game of infrastructure and penetration is largely completed.
Fantastic, John. So starting with the children, and as you say, the influence of parents, getting right at the source. Maybe now, sort of reflecting on the pandemic for a moment, the trends that you've all spoken about so far were underlying macro trends and drivers that were already in existence before we heard the word COVID-19. But of course, the pandemic has also accelerated some of these trends, but has also probably in some countries more than others maybe changed a bit permanently how people work. So thinking forward to how digital equity may evolve, what do you think? We'll start with you, Marta. What do you think is the sort of the next step of challenges in your region?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there are a lot of challenges ahead of us, especially as I'm looking at it right now from the economic point of view, because fiber deployment require, a significant upfront investments, and the recovery of the investments will be in a long term, like typically, 15, 20 years. So the recovery of the investment, the return on the investment, those are the issues that are subject to significant risks. And those risks can arise from the uncertainty around demand, the take-up, the regulatory risks, the costs. And this investment risk are heightened in Poland, because as we enter a period of high inflation, and we need to remember on potential economic turbulences related to the war in Ukraine. So this could result in significant, cost volatility, weaker demand for fiber services. And we as wholesalers have limited capacity to absorb these impacts. So given the fiber network deployments are already highly efficient, and the broadband prices in Poland are already among the lowest in Europe, there is, we are facing a very huge challenge as to the future. And the risks are also more visible right now, as we are facing very remote, hard to reach areas where the deployment costs are higher and less predictable, and demand and the take-up of the fiber services are more uncertain. So for me, this is the main challenge. And it also, stems from the COVID pandemic, apart, of course, of the fact that this was very good for our business, because people saw that this is something that is necessary. However, we are right now discussing the issue of this economic problems, because it can result in a slower and less extensive rollout of fiber across Poland. And of course, it would be to the detriment of Polish consumers, and we would like to avoid it.
Thanks, Mar. So, John, if we come to you, what's your view in your part of the world of sort of the next phase of challenges that are coming in digital equity, and what we might be able to do to go faster? What you touched on just before, something that I think I only really hear when I'm in Denmark, which is sort of questions being asked by children who've now grown into their teens of did my parents have a right to put my photos up when I was a child? And so there's an interesting thing around ownership of data. But what are your thoughts on sort of the next set of challenges here?
Yeah, I think we're lucky in that I think demand for for 5G or for fibre in Denmark is strong. I think it's now seen as a natural a requirement. I don't worry too much about that falling away. I worry about being able to persuade people of the next step economically. But to your core point, I think the Nordics have both a combination of a real sense of society and a real sense of obligation to each other, but they also have a very strong sense of online privacy. So, for example, some of the work on with DNS, for example, or traffic shaping that would be standard in the US or the UK is, from a net neutrality point of view, impossible here. And there's a very real concern about privacy and data. But there is there's a balance. How do you combine online privacy with this genuine sense of society that Danes are very proud of, rightly, in an online world? So I think there's a genuine question about how you manage to extend some of those norms of society into an online world where it's much more international, where existing rules of behaviour are not well observed. And that's, I think, the Finnish example I just touched on is maybe worth expanding on a little bit, which is Finland has a famously heavily invested education sector, invested enormously in that category. And since really since 2014, partly as a result of their concerns about Russia and be subject to fake news attack, they've invested very heavily in both children's and adult literacy around digital, training children and adults in digital education to help people to be able to spot fake news. And so and I think that's a genuine attempt to shift the values that people hold in the real world into the digital world, and to see it more as an extension of that, as opposed to a Wild West where nothing that the existing rules don't apply. So they're now first in the world for media literacy. If you look at the Open Society, it's had a huge impact. But those are things that are maybe possible in Nordic countries that are much tougher and more liberal in a European sense of the word, US or UK type environments.
Fascinating. Where the more just because a country has good connectivity and maybe a smaller digital divide doesn't mean there's not a next set of challenges to come. So that's a fascinating insight, John, for what will be coming to the rest of the world over the coming years. David, if we come back to Accelercom, your great strides in rolling out a fibre network, you talked about agricultural uses. How are you feeling about getting communities onto that network, and or any other challenge that you think is coming that you need to solve over the coming years?
Well, I think one of the perverse benefits of the pandemic has been this thirst for broadband, right? Here we are teleworking, and would have talked about what we streamed recently. I talked about remote telehealth, and John brought up remote education, which is super critical. I think in Kentucky 3 years ago, a grandma in Appalachian Kentucky who was raising her grandkids would have been indifferent at best as to what the quality of their broadband service is. That is not the case anymore. These small rural communities and their constituents they're asking where and when and how fast. Can we get broadband? How fast it will be? They're super anxious to connect to our network. They want to participate in the promise. I think, again, COVID perversely, promoted that. There are a lot of dollars, both federal and state dollars, billions of dollars targeting broadband connectivity, and we're working to participate in those programs to be sure that money is spent efficiently, hopefully on our network, and getting that Appalachian region and the other parts of the state served as effectively as possible. So in that regard, I think COVID really provided an impetus to get better faster.
Thank you so much for your time today. I think I feel we've made a good explanation for why high-speed, reliable connectivity is so critical for individuals and families and businesses. How there is a digital equity divide, even in countries where that connectivity is well established. It's just the next set of problems that need solving. But if we can all keep trying to get this connectivity out, bring better health services to people, support agriculture or other industries who are using these networks, think about how we can train the young, train the elderly, and to bring both the benefits of what more connectivity can bring, but also, as John highlights, some of the dangers that are out there if people aren't uneducated around what they need to look out for. So, look, thanks very much. I've really enjoyed the conversation, and thanks very much for your time today.
My pleasure.
Thanks, Nathan.
Thank you very much.